In this video, I'm going to work on desensitizing Atlas to the whip a bit. So this is the rest of the video where he worked on side passing to the mounting block. So now I'm just going to desensitize him, and he's anticipating doing the side passing again. So that's normal. I'm just going to say, no, raise my whips up. He really wanted to push his hip over, so I kind of got out of the way there. And then I'm just going to kind of correct him and push his hip away. So I'm going to yield his hindquarters. And just say like, nope, we're not doing that right now. We're going to do the opposite and kind of balance him out. And he just keeps wanting to step behind. There he steps underneath a couple times. I'm just going to go in there and desensitize him. So I'm just balancing him out. I'm just saying, nope, that's not what we're working on. And I'm trying to ask him to back up, and he's still thinking sideways. So even though the placement of my whips is different, he was a little confused. So when he took that step back, I'm going to click and then feed him. So I wanted to just desensitize him. That's how this video starts off. We were working on the side pass toward to the mounting block first. So that was a nice backward step. I'm going to click and feed him for that, and then just kind of work on the desensitizing. I really wanted to just have my whips touch him and he not be worried about it, but he wasn't really worried. He was just anticipating, which is fine. So again, I just kind of tossed the lash of my driving whip over his neck or over his withers, and he wanted to side pass, and he's not being bad. That's what we were working on. I'm just teaching him to differentiate. So I just yielded his hindquarters there, and he was decent, and then I'm going to ask him to back up, and then he thought more yield the hindquarters, and he's just all confused. So I'm just going to say, no, we're just going to stop and stand still and just work on a bit of desensitizing first. So now he's standing for the whiplash going over his withers, so that's good. I'm just going to speed this up real quick here because it's pretty much the same thing over and over. I'm just waiting for him to relax. So his neck is better. He's still definitely watching it with his ears a lot. They're turning as it goes on him, but he is relaxing a bit, so I'm going to back off, let him sit. Think about it. He's going to lick and chew. He's kind of turning his head away, showing some calming signals. And then we'll go back in and desensitize him a little bit more. But he's definitely relaxed a bit more so than he was when we started. He wasn't like, there he goes. So he lowers his neck. He's going to go back into grazing mode. I'm just going to ask him to yield his hindquarters. Or actually, I think I lifted my whip there just to desensitize him, and he went and yielded his hindquarters, which I'm fine with. As long as he was going to turn and face me, so that's fine. But so he's less tension than he did before, but a little bit. So like when I raised my whip, he just yielded his hindquarters over. But he's not anticipating as much. So that time, I yielded his hindquarters, or I desensitized him and I gave him a treat because he stayed still. So I'm asking him to yield his hindquarters over, or I was asking him to back up, and he decided he wanted to yield his hindquarters toward me like we were working on. So he's still a bit confused. So I'm just going to balance him out. So I kept asking with my whips there until he backed up. So I'm following through, and then I went ahead and asked for the hindquarters over. So I'm balancing him out again, so he's still confused. So I'm just saying, nope, scoot those hindquarters over, and then go ahead and desensitize. So he's just thinking one thing right now, which is fine. I want that anticipation for using it and teaching the behavior. But when I'm trying to kind of balance him out and work on some relaxation, he also wants to show it. So that's how you kind of fix that. So in the beginning, I want to use that anticipation to click and reward and show him that that's what I'm working on. That's what we want. But then when he keeps showing it, or he's offering it just on his own or in the place of a different behavior, so I'm just feeding him here because he's standing nice and relaxed here. Then I'm going to go ahead and do some desensitizing, just work on him standing still and relaxing, and then I'll click and reward those behaviors. So like right here, he's just standing and relaxing. So that's really good. So I just want to balance him out. So when he's offering behaviors and he's kind of going and doing, I'm going to do the opposite and reward the opposite of him just kind of standing and relaxing like he is here. So I'm going to click and reward this too. So another click and reward. So I'm just really jackpotting him here for just standing still and relaxing. So that's really nice. So we always balance. It doesn't matter if you want to use positive or negative reinforcement, you're always balancing your horse out at the time. So sometimes the horses can be really lazy. You need to get them going and rewarded them for going forward. And then sometimes like today, we got to do the opposite and reward him for being still and relaxed. So, I'm just tossing the rope over his withers here, or not the rope, the end of my driving whip. and we're gonna work on that a little bit. You saw in a couple videos previously, I was working on that, and it didn't go super well. It was a good learning video, but he was very tense. So here he's still worried again. So I'm just asking him to yield his hindquarters, so not run away, is to come back and face me. So you can see a little bit better from this angle, but I had just been tossing the whip lash up over his withers and clicking every time it goes over his withers. And he was pretty good with that, so I had moved up on his neck, and then he was not okay with that, and then you saw him run off. So again, back on the middle of his neck. So he's definitely not relaxed here at all. But I'm just kind of trying to like counteract that tension, and every couple times here when that whip goes over on his neck, I'm clicking and rewarding him. So I'm just trying to get him to associate the whiplash over his neck with something positive, because here you can see he's really tense, he's leaning away, he's looking away, he's thinking about leaving. So I just clicked him when that lash went over his neck. So I don't worry about the behavior that he's presenting, so he wants to leave. I'm just going to yield the hindquarters. I'm just worried about pairing the stimulus with something positive. So he wants to leave. I'm just asking him to yield his hindquarters and go forward a minute here. There, he comes back to me. I'm just going to ask him to come in, go back up there, and then go ahead and desensitize again with my whips. So I'm just rubbing my whip down his neck and then going right back into what we were doing when he decided to leave, right here in the middle of his neck. So he's still definitely very tense. He seemed pretty good with it on his withers. He was very decent with that. But once we got to the middle and the neck, he's really worried about that one. You can tell in his body language, he's thinking about leaving. He's looking to his right. He's kind of shaking his head there, like when he sees it come over his neck and into his other eye. I'm just clicking and feeding him for each time the lash goes over his neck. There, that was a lot better. That was not. I should have fed for that, not this click, the one before, because he was a lot more relaxed. So I'm still trying to get my timing right and trying to blend the negative and positive reinforcement together so I can kind of look back and see where I've made a mistake, because clearly I should have gone back to desensitizing with the lash on his withers, because he's way over threshold here, and I should be going back to something that's easier, building his confidence, because he's definitely not okay with this. But I think that's some of the negative reinforcement old habits in here, because I'm like, okay, well, he's worried, so I'm just going to kind of stick in there and wait for him to relax, which you can use sometimes, but I really have found, especially with the Mustangs and especially with Atlas, that doesn't really work. So since this video, so I'm just going to get him to yield his hindquarters and face me here. So what works better for him is just going back a step and building his confidence, because when I stay there and try to keep it and keep the whatever he was afraid of in the same place, he just either shuts down and freezes, or he just explodes. Or he probably does both. He probably shuts down and then explodes, and he's just scared the whole time. So even adding in that positive reinforcement or clicking more often, he's still really tense, as you can see here. His neck's up, his head's up, he's moving his head when that lash comes over. He's definitely not relaxed at all. He's trying to look at the whip. I clicked him for that. He starts chewing as soon as he hears that, because he knows that I'm going to feed him. He's not necessarily relaxed. He's just preparing to eat, basically, because he probably still had some hay in his mouth from the previous click that I gave him, and then he just got really tense and was just holding it in his mouth. So you see when I go to just pick up the whip and go to throw the lash over his neck, he's worried. So instead of continuing here, I should have gone back to his withers and really worked on that, and then slowly built up. So I went pretty much from having the whip on his withers to having it in the middle of his neck. I should have broken that down a little bit more. So this is a little bit better. He's still definitely tense, and the lash will sometimes kind of fling up toward his face, and he's not particularly loving that. He didn't react as much that time. Like, it did touch him in the face, and instead of spinning away, he did lower his head, shake his head, and try to like give himself a calming signal and relax a bit then versus the running off. So that's good. He is staying, but he's definitely not relaxed. So I would definitely go back a step or a few steps and make sure that's better before I move on here. But this is also a very good learning experience and a learning process, and it's good to watch and see on things that you can improve on. So, but he looks a little bit better here. Still a bit worried, but better. We don't have the head moving around as much. Now we have the head up a bit more, and he's kind of moving on his feet like he'd like to go backwards and maybe spin away. There's his head. There he goes. So you see, you can kind of see all that little body language before he actually left, which is interesting. And he kind of leans on his shoulders and then he leaves. I'm just feeling his hindquarters and asking him to come back. And he comes back nicely. But you can tell that he doesn't want to be there. And I'm just trying to kind of mix the positive reinforcement and the negative reinforcement without fully knowing what I'm doing with the positive reinforcement. And so that's where we're getting a bit of the confusion here. The training did get done, as you'll see as I keep putting out the videos, but it is just an interesting process. Because what I'd previously known about Mustangs and negative reinforcement is you kind of just keep going with them, keep staying with them. Once they leave, you're just going to have them turn and face you, or have them like run around in the pen a little bit. And I quickly figured out that that was not going to work with these horses because they were already scared about like this whip process, and then they ran off, and then you punish them for that too. So now they think they can't run, and then you kind of have a horse that's even more wound up and then knows that they can't leave, so they just want to stand there and kind of shut down and then explode. So that's not great to have either. So, but I've kind of moved a little bit up his neck. That was a really nice time that time. Click him and feed him for that. He was a bit more relaxed that time. But looking back on it, I can definitely tell why Atlas had such a hard time with having this lash on his neck. But he did relax there, shook his head, had a little calming signal. That was pretty decent too. I'm going to click and feed him for that. So I think kind of in the beginning, middle of the video, I was clicking and feeding for each one, and then I was like, oh, that one wasn't good, and then I'm kind of all over the place with my reinforcement. So I've gotten a lot steadier with that. I should have gone back a step, worked on the withers. Every time it touches his withers, click and feed, and then just move like 1 inch up and then click and feed, and then 1 inch up and click and feed every single time to really build that confidence. But instead of that, we have this nice learning video. So he is ending a lot calmer than he was kind of in the beginning/middle. So we'll just end on that and work on it a little bit later.